We have started taking actions with regards to organized industrial zones and other plants. Right now, we are talking to clients that are projects that we have come to agreement with. Hello, my name is Evra Raci. We have an expertise in pre-construction services, so the difference between licensed and unlicensed for us is the difference for expropriation. So 1 out of every 3 megawatts is something that we develop. As a director, I have a 16-year experience. Now I am focused on sustainability and energy, and we are providing consultancy services. I agree. In 2006, we carried out the first self-consumption project in Turkey, and since then it has been 16 years, and we have developed many projects. And now with the new version of the legislation, I think these actions will be accelerated, and I hope that this will be a session where we will talk about why it should be accelerated. I would like to thank you for your participation, and I wish you a good session. Okay, Mehmet Bey, can you analyze licensed projects from the perspective of TSG? Let me start this way. First of all, I would like to apologize because I couldn't change my schedule, so I have to attend an online meeting at 2. So because of the COVID, we have had this obligation to attend this online meeting. So we skipped the food, we skipped lunch. That is why we had to start late, and I would like to apologize. But let me put it this way. ESG. No, sorry, it's okay. I can talk about it. ESG is environmental social governance. Previously, it was also called sustainability, but now all the stakeholders have this on their agenda, especially after the advent of the COVID. In 2020, BlackRock CEO got involved, and he said that they wouldn't invest in non-renewable energy, I mean coal and thermal power plants. And after that, the whole world has assumed a different opinion. So ESG, in terms of ESG, I can also say that unlicensed electricity generation regulation and the YECTA model are important elements in terms of the improvement of the renewable energy in Turkey. It has raised the public awareness. And in terms of licensed electricity production, we are over 8,000 megawatts, and by the end of the year it will be around 10,000 megawatts. So, and also we see the capacity increase in unlicensed electricity, and the legislation has different provisions about that as well. And Chown Textile will also talk about the project, and the likes of it should increase. And people and projects are now focused on consumption through their own generation. So when it comes to environmental social governance, when we deal with these issues, now all these financial impacts and the involvement and the awareness of stakeholders have brought about energy efficiency and renewable energy and more investments in this. And in terms of ESG, this is where the projects go. And in Turkey, according to our studies, we know that we are around 102 gigawatt in Turkey, and in the next 7 or 8 years, we are going to talk about 150 gigawatts in total production. So the growth will rely on renewable energy. If I had a presentation, I will show you the chart, but hydroelectricity has 30 gigawatts capacity in Turkey. It has the largest renewable capacity, and its share in total mix decreases, and the wind now leads the sector, and the solar energy leads this sector. And ESG in this context, with the Green Deal and the Paris Climate Agreement, we are directly involved in them. And the page 1, the Article 1 of Green Deal says that we are in a climate crisis, and the Article 3 says that all the stakeholders that we collaborate with, unless they are involved and they become part of the solution, we cannot fight against climate change. And in COP27, I think it will be held in a few weeks in Egypt. So with that being the case, global consumers and their importance that they attach to environment, and the fact that we are the largest exporter for European Union countries, all of them have started to affect us. We must have renewable energy usage. We also need to have systems for water filtering, water treatment, and we also need to take into account environmental effects. We need to take into account energy efficiency, because I was in Ankara yesterday. So we were attending workshops about the national energy efficiency plans. Thank you. Now everything comes down to ESG. I was talking about this, everyone is taking direction accordingly, when it comes to water management, low carbon emission and transition to low carbon economy, and diversification in resources and taxes. And if you ask me if we should talk about taxes, maybe I said that we should talk about not only about tax, because there is an emission trade market, and in January 1, in 2022, in the National Council, a statement was released. As of January 1st, 2024, the emission trade system will be tested in Turkey. So what does this mean? European Union does this already. There is a mechanism called carbon mechanism, threshold carbon mechanism. The products that you export, it has a cargo shipment number. So this will be the same. This will also have a carbon number, and it will be licensed or unlicensed. And in all renewable energy power plants, it will have a positive impact on all industrialists. And I have just mentioned about this chart. You can see the share of solar and wind energy. The red line indicates the progress made in other renewable energy forms, and the other part shows the decrease in hydro power plants, which is led by wind energy. And I can wrap up here right now. For industrialists and for investors and for financial institutions, about the resources that they can import, they need to comply with social rights, they need to comply with management principles, and they need to be sustainable. And we will see that they will get a larger share of the pie in years to come. And maybe this hasn't been officially released yet, but as far as we know, in terms of funds and credibility, this number will be tripled in 2023. Thank you for your attention. I always worked in factories, so I was concerned about working in an office. I was factory oriented. I need to see the production lines. So after the regulation on unlicensed electricity production was introduced, I was happy to serve for the Turkish industry, for Enercon, or they call me unlicensed guy because I have this passion for factories, and it's a great pleasure for me to serve for them. But most of my tasks is licensed production. With Can Aydoğan, with Aydoğan and Typhoon, we serve for all aspects of the industry. And our actions about unlicensed production, we need to say this. It is important to take a look at the matter from the perspective of industrialists, and I will try to tell you about it because each industry is an important item. So how did this process start? Let me go back a little bit. The energy prices rose, and it has affected the industrialists very badly. So in the short term or in the medium term, some solutions were offered. In the short term, umbrella solar energy power plants were introduced. Industrialists extinguished the fire a little bit. Some industries were focused on low energy capacity, but when it comes to Çatıgaz, I mean the rooftop solar energy systems were introduced, but the 51H regulation stipulates that the wind energy, the investments in wind energy are going to be effective because we are in contact with many project owners. But this is not only about finance, or it is not only about energy input. This is not the right perspective. In fact, what we need to look at is the developments. Let me show you a few examples. When it comes to supply security. We had a time when we didn't have any electricity, the energy prices, the carbon emission. These are important factors. We need to provide a vision, first of all. In 2006, we were the first company to introduce the first self-consumption wind power plant. And the return on investment was 7 or 8 years, but the company had a vision. Now their feasibility has changed dramatically, and now their return on investment is not 7 to 8 years. And the legislation for environmental compliance has changed dramatically. So you need to assume a vision and a responsibility here. And when you look at what the rest of the world does, we can say that the value of electricity will increase. You can make all the financial calculations, but we need to understand the most basic paradigm. It is like, I consider electricity to be a commodity. In terms of function, it makes sense, because early in the morning Sardar said to Europe and the rest of the world now use internal combustion engines, and automation is becoming more popular. So we are living in a world where everything evolves into electricity. So to have the capability to produce electricity is something that everyone should address. Everyone should be interested in. Maybe we make calculations here, but we might face some unpredictable things in the future. So to supply this is very important. So we need to establish that as a paradigm. We have talked about carbon regulations, because otherwise it would take 2 or 3 hours. There are incentives. We can talk about them as well. Another important element is that I am environmental friendly, first of all. You also need to know what consumers think. When I go to a shopping mall today, let's imagine that there are 2 t-shirt brands. One of them says they don't emit any carbon while manufacturing that t-shirt. One of them is 100 liras, and the one with no carbon emission is 110. I would buy the more expensive one. I have a 3-year-old kid who goes to a nursery school and who is receiving education about environmental friendliness. So Turkish industrialists make their own brands, or they send their products as a subcontractor to major companies. I worked in an automotive company. The goal for 2050 is net zero, emissions zero, and zero water consumption, and zero mining consumption. All of the cars by 2050 will be made of renewable materials, and it will also have an impact on biodiversity. So when you operate at a location, you are not even supposed to have an adverse impact on insects. So this will also have an impact on the subcontractors. For instance, when I watch a Premier League game during the weekend, one of the billboards, argues that one of the international airlines says that I am flying with zero carbon emission. The electricity of the stadium is generated through renewable energy, and the players are transported with renewable energy cars. So, with that being the case, industrialists need to set a vision for the future, and this will be also a message. This will be our duty to the next generations. It is important to establish this perspective. We have talked about the customs carbon taxes, and there is a great opportunity for this as well. What happened in Europe, as you might remember, Europe has standards about environments for production, and since some European manufacturers try to avoid this, they, given contracts to countries where carbon emission is more flexible. The rules about carbon emission are not that strict. Maybe in Turkey, maybe in China, maybe in Turkey. So it is called carbon leak as well. So it didn't have a major impact on the rest of the world. But the new EU regulation also stipulates that these carbon emissions shouldn't be released in other parts of the world either. So this is an opportunity and a threat for Turkey as well. So the faster we take actions about this, then the more advantage we can have compared to Europe, because China will do things, and China has been making investments for transition into green energy. So we need to take quick steps, and it is important to take quick steps. Let me show you 2 images to wrap up. So to sum up, we have been involved in this for the past 16 years in Turkey. Everyone now focuses on rooftop solar energy systems. This might turn into a major trend. However, you need to also consider the fact that, of course, we have a large wind energy potential. But if your factory is located at a location with lots of wind energy potential, you can make use of it. Let me give you an example here. This is average. For instance, it can vary from one region to another. If you install a 10 megawatt wind energy power plant, you can do the same with 5 megawatts solar energy, because solar energy panels also work during the night. And instead of a solar energy system that will be spread around a land of 180 square meters, you can do the same on a land of 30 square meters if you do it with wind energy. This wind turbine rotates, so the projection of the blades shouldn't be out of the scope, and the area it occupies on the land is half a acre. So you need to take that into account, and the rest of the land can be utilized as well. You have seen in the courtyard of the factory there are storehouses there. There are other buildings, and if you buy another land, you can use it as a container or for storage purposes. So we can take technological measures if there are going to be staff members there. But so there's an opportunity. The size of the lands needed for the wind turbine is half a acre, and it offers environmental opportunities. And you can also expand the scope with solar energy if you start with the wind energy. That's all for my presentation. To meet this self-consumption, what kind of process should investors go through? What should be done for project development? That's my question for you. To reduce carbon footprints and to enhance their brand value, or to reduce the cost, could be solutions, or the difficulties may push us. When it comes to unlicensed production, there are 85 projects with a total of 81.6 megawatts. As you know, the regulation was introduced in 2009, and the limit was 500 megawatts. There was no turbine under 1 megawatt, and then there was this limit for 5 megawatt, and with 51H, everyone is now able to put rooftop solar energy. So we need to achieve the goal, but consumption is a lot. And I am sure Chari knows about this. Since the consumption is high, solar energy on rooftops cannot meet the demand after a while. Of course, I'm not saying that, I know that the solar energy should be coupled with wind energy, and it should be coupled with hybrid systems as well. But wind has a higher capacity, and the decline in production values is more acceptable. So it has made unlicensed projects more attractive recently, but we cannot do it. Why not? Because this is a simplified version. I think we can have 20 more slides out of this presentation. Let me put it this way. There are many parameters that we need to consider. It has to have connectivity. To install a facility over 50 megawatts, you need to have some infrastructure, and at locations where the wind blows the highest, blows the best, there is not much capacity. And before August 11, we had this situation, it had to be on a distribution line. So this was a requirement, and this limits us. And after January, consumption can be anywhere. But first of all, you go to a location, you need to have wind energy there. For instance, in Akhisar, you are very fortunate, but usually you need to have a facility at locations where the wind energy is a lot. And you cannot use forests or meadows, pastures but there has been an amendment to the treasure lands regulation. But when you find the location, it should be an agricultural land, and there should be also a connectivity capacity. But those circumstances are specific to that day, that time, because after a while, another application may be launched, may be made, and things can change. Let's imagine that everything goes according to the plan. As I said at the outset of my speech, the difference is expropriation. You cannot expropriate the land if you do not have a license. And here, you can do that for solar energy at any location, but when it comes to wind energy, it is a different story. So when you start this process, there is a dramatic difference that you will notice after the amendment to the regulation. For any licensed or unlicensed wind energy project, you need to go through an environmental impact assessment process. And TUREP, I know that TUREP also receives opinions about environmental impact assessments, and the environmental impact assessment is no longer a requirement because it had you had to make sure that your facility stays there for 9 months, and we have received an application, but we had to start the process. So you have to make an application before going through the environmental impact assessments. So you make your application, but when it comes to wind energy, the location shouldn't conflict with another field. So to make an assessment, you have to go to the Directorate of Energy Works, and then you TEIA, Technique Equipment Analysis, and you can apply for it until the 15th day of the month, and you can do so through RAPSIM. And any applications made until the 15th day of the month are concluded within 3 months. Sorry if I am running out of time. The reason why I'm telling you this is the fact that TEIA, for permits or for military purposes, even in our current power plants, we see some irregularities, especially new turbines have many towers and blades. Even in licensed power plants, when they need to increase their capacity, they had some difficulties in terms of TEIA. Since there is no public interest in unlicensed projects, so there is a potential to have a negative response. So in terms of feasibility, there is still a question mark. You get a pre-license for 10 megawatts. But that is not possible here. It's like, so when you give up, you have to start from the scratch. So you need to go on with some assumptions, and you need to also have orders. There are some projects where orders are made. So after TEIA, you need to eliminate the other limitations. You need to take them under control. And you need to, if you start the environmental impact assessment with the open call, you can start your project. You can carry out your project before TEIA. They hold the capacity for you. So you expect to get an open call, an open letter. Then we can talk about the open letter later on. Let me ask you a question. After you start the permission processes, of course, there is this handicap. There might be applications made after you make your application, but, the locations for wind energy are marginal locations. There is not much possibility to coincide with solar energy sites or locations. So it's a process. You need to revise, you need to go through some revision. And it depends on the administrations. For instance, with revision, you can go to a higher location. But it will change in a positive way. It will be shortened, right? Yes, because it goes into simulation, and I don't know if it will take 2-3 months. So it's a standard time. Thank you. It's more efficient as an energy source, and we are talking about storage today, and the reason behind storage is the imbalance over the renewable energy sources. In order to prevent this imbalance, You need to couple wind energy with solar energy. It is more important than storage. The rest of the world is doing this. So we need to use both sources, both resources, and we need to make sure that it contributes to the economy of the country. And we can also discuss the trends here. Now I will give the floor to Ortun. The regulation on self-consumption and the turbine types of turbines that we can provide as a part of the regulation. Last year, with the introduction of BESH 5NH, the capacity has been increasing, and now projects similar to our projects are being carried out. We have seen that. Ismet Bey and Ebru Hanım have talked about the process in detail. As a turbine supplier, let me tell you where we come into play. Maybe I will have some self-promotion, but there's a reason for that. Because our approach has been like this. We have been carrying out projects since 2008, and across all over Turkey, almost all over Turkey, we have been operating, and we have 95 project locations and 86 service points. And they serve for organized industrial zones, and the companies that we are in contact with, so we will be able to support them as well. So it is like a normal project development process. You need to respond well, and you need to choose the right kind of turbines. And in this process, when the project development process is completed, when you need to have a turbine, we need measurements, we need data, and how many turbines you need. So at that point, we can start supporting you. And for the next step, we can get involved in technical works to manage the whole process. And after contracts are made, the supply of the turbine is completed and it is activated and provide the services. For example, I said that we do not have an activity about this, but we had an agreement with Coca-Cola. Let me give you an example. It is located in Çerkezköy. Within those factories, the mounting of the turbines requires many considerations, not only for suitability in terms of location, but also the joint actions to be taken so that we can eliminate any potential problems in the future. As Ebru Hanım has mentioned, the replacement of a turbine make things take a long time. So when we do this in another city, it will be like a normal project development process, and it takes a long time. We will talk about this in the second round, about the solar and wind energy. But these processes, as I have said before, take some time and take some considerations in terms of location, and it also takes a long project development process involving the supply of turbines and the financing as well. So it has a different aspect now. It is not like it used to be. You are not only in factories now. As a part of self-consumption, large industrialists and large factories they work with large capacities, and we manage them. And we engage in talks with them as well. So the best turbines, the measurements, and the best location are the criteria that we need to take into account for us to manage the process and to provide services. Thank you. Oytun. For a long time, you have had wind energy turbines across the country. How about the processes, before the operation starts? You own a wind energy power plant, a licensed one. Can you share your experience? Let me start with this. We have a total of 7 wind energy power plants. 2 of them are located in Çanakkale on Gökçeada. It has 800 kilowatts installed capacity. The other 2 ones are located in Lapseki, Çanakkale. And the other 3 are located in Erdek, Balıkesir. And they also have 800 kilowatts installed capacity, and their annual production is 18 million kilowatts hour. Only one of them actually produces 12 kilowatts per hour, and it depends on the context. And these power plants, 2 of them were built in 2015, 2 of them were built in 2016, and then 3 of them were activated in 2017. And they have the guarantee to have the generated electricity both. Because of the rising prices in electricity, we have taken some actions, and as an official letter was delivered to us from the distribution companies. We couldn't achieve the compensation. The electricity unit price is 5 liras in the distribution location, and we have a standardized price. And in a different scenario, it would cost 1.5 Turkish lira. So we would save 80% in terms of cost. In addition, at the locations of wind power plants, especially during time, there are some failures arising from the distribution lines. That is why these wind turbines stop operating, and we came into office. We have been focused on repair and maintenance, and the maintenance of the cutting sections on the line, and the arrangements for relays, so we can produce additional 400 kilowatts. And in 7 power plants, we can generate 270 kilowatts. And we have done this with Enercon. Their maintenance actions were completed on time, and our electrical works, in cooperation with distribution companies, increase the readily available rate from 95 to 98. So the surplus generation was created. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Suat. During project development, of course, it takes a long time. So what should be done to shorten this process? For those who wants to start this process, what should they done in the first place to shorten this process? Can you elaborate on that? The first request we receive usually is this, they say that they need a turbine. Can I buy a turbine? But first thing, there are some requirements that you need to meet. Because our identity is turbine manufacturer. We activate it. But there are other requirements to be met by industrialists. Ebru has mentioned, it's like blood, sweat, and tear. Because wind projects require patience as a project development process. But it has never been easy for industrialists, so far. I know that industrialists have a great deal of patience. So I think this is how these projects can be carried out. Here, let me explain it to you. One of the fundamental tenets of project development is as follows. We are subject to the same regulation. This regulation governs the licensed and unlicensed electricity generation, and it also provides provisions about incentives as well. So basically, we are talking about a regulation consisting of 20 pages. So you need to read it first very well. This is my recommendation. And second of all, each industrialist has talented engineers who are familiar with the terminology. So when you compare between megawatts, it is wrong because you need to rely on energy, not power. So you need to take into account kilowatts because at the end of the day, the ultimate value will be based on energy. And you need people who will lead this process and who are familiar with this terminology. You need a team or a person. So after you are familiar with the terminology, of course, you will have to have a contract for connectivity. And then you need a very good consultant. And this consultant may forget about, making an application in an authority, and by the end of the day, the industrialist may give up because it's a process that may take years. That is why it is important for you to work with experienced consultants, because we are manufacturers, but there are 4 requirements for these types of projects. One of them is bureaucratic procedures, and the second one is the turbines themselves, and the construction and electricity works as well. So these requires management by the investors. So this can be done by investors and consultants. A good consultant, can make an unlicensed wind power plant possible, or can do vice versa. And we believe that the project development processes are very important. And Oytun has mentioned this. One of the things that investors need to take into account is the service network. The Turkish industrialists are very fortunate because the world's largest turbine manufacturers are here in Turkey with hundreds of staff members and with a service network. And we can also see some companies that are not based in Turkey, being involved in this process. But let me put it this way. We are talking about being readily available. We give a guarantee for being readily available when we give this turbine. For instance, the failure time for this turbine will not be more than 5% of the time during a year. And if it is more than 5%, then you will be compensated by our company. This is a guarantee for you to receive these services for years. So you may think that you are safe in terms of contracts, but when you do not have a counterpart, you cannot seek claims in any court, in China or in Europe. You cannot seek claims or you cannot defend your cause in those courts. So you need to have trust in your counterparts, and we can give guarantee for being readily available. And there are other companies that can do so as well. So when a turbine fails, breaks down, for instance, even you manufacture the best one, they can fail. So what is important is to provide services as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you would be compensated. So for industrialists to feel safe, they need to work with long-standing companies that are based in Turkey or companies that have commitments with the Turkish companies that provide guarantees. So these are the things that need to be taken into account. As I said before, there are 4 requirements: a good consultant, and the right choice of turbines is another important requirement. And we need to take this one step further. I worked in factories, as I said before. The annual consumption is a 5 billion kilowatts hour. So in an iron and steel company, you can also be subject to carbon tax. So no iron steel company, I don't think anyone will be in trouble if an iron and steel company doesn't emit any carbon emission. I don't think anyone will have a problem with that. However, when a company does it, that company will be preferred. After one company does it, then everyone will follow. So some steps need to be taken, some strategies need to be adopted as soon as possible. They need to be activated as soon as possible, and it will be very valuable. So when you develop a project, you need to start with the right consultant, and you can start making applications. Maybe you will be denied, but starting requires very little amount of investments and cost. So these steps need to be taken at least. So it is important. Last but not least, as a recommendation to investors, when we give guarantee for services, it's a long-term guarantee, by the way. We say that when you buy a product, it has a 2-year guarantee. When you buy a car, for instance, if a car manufacturing company tells you that if you give me 1% of the price of the car for the services, including maintenance and repair and replacement of some components, if a car manufacturing company makes such an offer to you, and everyone would agree, it would only cost 10,000 Turkish lira, because when you go to a service for maintenance, you already pay for it. So imagine getting a guarantee for 15 years, a full guarantee for 15 years. So there is a standard in the wind energy sector. Maybe the wind energy sector has developed functions that help industrialists feel safe. But in order to give this guarantee, we would like to have measurements for wind potential on the field. And investors should do this as soon as possible if they have a project in mind, if they have a location in mind. They should start construction as soon as possible, because for us to make such a commitment, such a long-term commitment, we need to know whether there is any turbulence at that location, whether our turbines are suitable for that location. So we need to make sure. So by the end of the day, if we are going to enter into a service agreement with an investor, then the investor should work with a company that measures the wind potential and the wind strength as well, and that they need to plant a wind measurement mast as soon as possible when they have a location. You need to have ultrasonic nanometers at a location and a normal nanometer on the hill as well to make calculations. So with rightly calculated, with an accurately calculated wind measurement mast, you can do so much, because when you invest 5,000 euros, which you might think that is little, you may not generate any electricity for 12 months because of the seasonality, because you cannot complete the seasonality cycle. So a good practitioner is also important here. That would be my recommendation. Thank you, Ismet. You have explained what to do to shorten the process. Oytun, do you have anything to add? He has given many details about the process. And a pre-analysis is conducted, calculations are made, and then they immediately want to start the process for supply for a turbine. But the turbines models have become so large, and now they are being built at locations other than factories. This requires good measurements, which is something that we suffer from. Since 2018 and 19, we have had a project in Çerkezköy, Çorlu. We have analysis, and based on those analysis, we generate data, but we also need projections. We can provide you with projections, but we need a 1-year measurement with the companies who are involved in the process. As Ebru said, it takes, blood, sweat, and tears, because it requires patience. I have been involved in these projects for 8 years. Ebru might have more experience than I do, especially in project development processes. So this brings about challenges for which you need to be ready. So there is no mathematical formula that I can offer for you. Of course, you need to work with a consultant or a team who are familiar with the details. This is very important, because you can buy a turbine and you can make investments, significant investments, especially in infrastructure. But there is also a calculation for turbines to operate for 20-25 years to provide you with benefits. So the right turbine and the right location are the key. Unless you locate them well, then it may cause problems in the long term. And of course, the services are important from the perspective of OPEX. In order to have your calculations to be correct, the turbine operators need to be provided with a set of services. The world's largest turbine manufacturers have very large network here. Vestas, Enerco, and Siemens and GE have made investments here for years, and they have a network now, and the workforce here and the know-how here, are significant. When I started this business in Germany years ago, I was a project manager, Now our project managers are in Lithuania, are in Poland, managing projects. So they now have the know-how. We can export workforce. We can also export equipment as well. So in terms of blades and towers, we can generators, we can export them. So we need to take this into account. This is like a marriage because it will take 20 to 25 years. So you need to know the companies that you are going to collaborate with. And when you make investment decisions, of course you would like to have affordable prices, but you need to have a different perspective as well when it comes to wind power plants, because when it comes to solar, hydro, and other types of energy, it is different, because in the wind energy, you fight against the nature. You have towers 120 meters high, or, their radius is 175 meters, so they fight against the wind. The turbines fight against the wind. So you need to have a reliable company that builds them and provide you with guarantees, and you need to be able to use their services for a long time. So making investments accordingly might be more expensive, but in the long run, it would provide you with more benefits, and on paper, the calculations that you make on paper would turn out to be correct. Thank you. We have 10 minutes left. I have a final question. We have 10 to 15 minutes. The unlicensed installed capacity was nearly 8 gigawatts, and almost all of them were solar projects. The wind energy projects were very few. It was like it had the capacity of 81.6. And we know about the unlicensed capacity distributed this year. It is nearly 10 gigawatts. TH will allocate it. And all of this capacity is based on solar energy. So where do we make the mistake? What is our mistake? Because when we designed the system, why did we leave the wind energy behind or out of the equation? Because it will be more beneficial for the whole system to couple them together. So in order to run this process along with the unlicensed projects, what kind of incentive mechanism can we offer? Let me ask this question to Ebru first. Of course, it takes blood, sweat, and tears, but when it is done, everyone is happy, tends to be happy, and I hope that anyone interested in carrying out projects can do so. The legislation gives you an opportunity to couple solar energy with wind energy, because we are going faster than the pace of the legislation. Kardemir operates a wind power plant in Aliağa, for instance, because they have power plants there. Some facilities are fortunate. There is one in Thrace, for instance. But it is about the nature of the wind energy. Of course, we would like to make use of solar energy, and at locations where you can have wind energy, you mostly get solar energy as well. There are a few reasons why we don't make enough use of wind energy. Their capacity, the companies that contact me have different capacities, but with new regulations, maybe the capacity allocations can be redesigned. So maybe we can provide an affirmative discrimination for wind energy investors. Anything that you would like to add, by the way? Let me add this. I said this before. Right now, those who provided wind energy consultancy and they know that they would like their investors to engage in wind energy projects. So I believe that the wind energy sector will grow. I am positive about that. But Ebru has mentioned something very important. The legislators, the lawmakers need to take some measurements, especially about capacity factor in the Thrace region. We have a great potential for wind. And in terms of solar energy, the Thrace region is actually going faster than the rest of the country. So it is also beneficial for the country. It is also not in the national interest, to have. It is against the national interest to consider solar and wind energy equal. I mean, to some extent, we should have a balance at least. We should have separation between these two. This is my personal opinion. At some locations, there is a limited connectivity capacity. We have a limited distribution line, so we need to make sure that they are driven to right distribution lines. This is a national interest. This is in the interest of the Ministry of Energy. This is in the interest of the Ministry of Industry as well. We are taking steps. And let me add this before I conclude my speech. Wind turbines date back to 35 to 40 years ago. It started with small-scale wind turbines, but as the space gets narrower, now the size of the wind turbines becomes larger. We are talking about turbines with blades 175 meters in diameter. So I can say this to investors and industrialists, not only in the western or Thrace region of Turkey, even in the southern and northern parts in Aarhus, Sinop and Konya, in Afyon and Antalya, it is possible to make use of the wind energy. Of course, at some locations the terrain is limited, but at some other locations it is possible to find the wind energy. And if we can make use of the capacity, then I am sure the number of wind power plants will also increase. Let me give you an example. One of the companies wanted to build 2 wind turbines, and there was a road going nearby, and you have these requirements, 1.5 kilometers. The turbines need to be 1.5 kilometers away from the highways. So I think when it comes to the predominant wind direction, I think it is 2.5 kilometers. It can go up to 5 kilometers as far as I know. So So when you try to put 2 turbines there, then it means that it's part of a promotional effort. We always have contacts with you. We try to inform people all the time, but we would suggest those who are interested to be knowledgeable about the parameters. They sell the equipment and materials. They know what works, and they know about the requirements, and they can tell about them the best. So they are the most reliable companies, because we have so many guests here. If there is any question, we can have them as well. The diameter of this blade is 160, let's assume that. And the dominant wind direction is across us. So you need to go to the right side 5 times, and you need to go back 7 times, in terms of distance. So that their impact wouldn't conflict with one another. My name is Yiğit Azan from GE. I have a question for Suat. The reason why we talk about this is to make use of the unlicensed projects for consumption. But you said that you cannot use them for consumption. What is the barrier? The system is connected in a lump sum, and for 10 years we made money in exchange of consumption. Because of the rising electricity prices, all of these devices are now going to be connected to the lines, and there has been a directive to the distribution companies. They are located in an industrial organized zone, and they are going to net off thanks to the production. We received an official letter saying that this is not possible anymore. This was a last-minute letter, and to net off, for the power plants to net off, they cannot use it. But for new investments, they can be used for net off. We have been told this verbally and in writing as well, because the unit price of the electricity for 5 kilowatt is now going to be 1.5 lira. So we have made the decision to make more investments. We are looking for a land now, because we have a license for 10 megawatt in Balıkesir. So we will maybe continue our licensed generation, but quickly we have plans to make wind energy projects, because we need to find the land as soon as possible, and we will add the components. So this facility will start generating electricity within 6 to 8 months. So that is why we are contemplating with wind energy. The points of consumption are different. Back in the day we thought that the netting of the meters wasn't our concern, but then we were told that it is one of our responsibilities. But as the gentleman said, it was 2015 when the pre-acceptance term was approved for our power plants, so there was no net off. So in this case, this is the major problem. We are going to buy a license. We have an investment. Our consumption is 12 million kilowatts per hour, and the generation is almost 20 million kilowatt hour, so it matches. So it was going to be a major benefit for our company. We would have net zero, but unfortunately this couldn't happen. We know that there are some considerations that are taken into account. Maybe in the future a new way can open, but I think it will not be possible because of the investments. I think this opportunity will be provided to new investors. You cannot net off pre-licensed power plants for self-consumption. The legislation doesn't allow you to do that, but Mustafa has made a statement. My assessment was independent of netting off. You are talking of bilateral agreements. I mean, it wouldn't be right to consider it 6 months. Don't think that it would be 6 months, because we are talking about 99 hours. As Mustafa said, storage will be more important, so they need to make applications for that. Maybe the legislation can allow to do that. I'm just saying this out loud. You cannot net off for self-consumption. Of course, as Junaid said, we urge our industrialists to make applications for storage. Maybe the chairman meant this. In terms of energy trade, netting off. So it makes more sense from the economic perspective, integrated storage. These advantages with such high production. The dynamics are very different between two of them. I don't know if things would be different or how different they would be in the future. So you need to conduct risk analysis for both of them. So with future regulations, you need to understand which one would be more advantageous. So this requires a comprehensive assessment. You need to have a good analysis for the dynamics of both. This has to be decided by investors. I cannot say this or that option would be better. So like I said, their dynamics are entirely different. When it comes to licensed, you are subject to the price that's based on your consumption. So you are subject to the price for consumption. And on the other hand, you need to engage in trade Oytun, I would like to add something. There is something to be said because storage will also have a significant cost, of course, for extra capacity. But when you make a comparison between two of them, you need to have an analysis first. Thank you.